You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
Let me say this. Senator, you see that gentleman? That's Roland Martin. Your folks need to get with him. Y'all need to talk to the black press. You know, I don't talk out both sides of my mouth. What I say on radio, I say in public. I say I was going to tell you and Pete and all y'all, talk to the black. There's Roland right there. So y'all get that together. Did I do my assignment, sir? All right. Thank you.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, thanks for joining us at Roland Martin Unfiltered. First and foremost, when you look at your polling numbers, not doing well at all among African Americans, what's the deal? Why are you not connecting with black voters?
Well, first of all, Roland, thanks for having me on the show, and look forward to being on many times in the future, and I appreciate the work you do. As for me, I've got to earn support with black voters. I did earn that in my state of Minnesota, where I have done very well and had strong votes when you look at all my elections in the community, as well as support from the leaders in the community. So now it's my job to get out there and meet people and spread my message. And I know that other people have kind of a head start there, Vice President Biden being loved and well-known in the community. I get that, but that doesn't mean that I don't just keep pushing things out there. One, I've been the leader on voting, like the voting purge bill. That's mine with Sherrod Brown. The work that I've done when it comes to getting rid of gerrymandering, registering every kid to vote when they turn 18, same-day registration across the country, a bill I did with Keith Ellison years ago and still am leading. And then economic justice, which to me is a major issue in the community, that a lot of broken promises are still out there. People say a lot of stuff in elections, and then they don't make them come true. I'm someone that keeps my promises, and I have a very big focus on helping people for shared prosperity, and that's everything from childcare to investing in K through 12. My kid went to public schools. She was at a school that was 90% free and reduced lunch for years. I've got some experience that other people don't have on the stage when it comes to public schools and the work that needs to be done to make things more fair. And then criminal justice reform. I'm someone that knows the bad and the goods of the system. I think we need some major changes, and as president, I'll be in the position to get them done.
One of the issues when you talk about obviously appealing to African Americans that is reaching out, and look, and I have no problem saying it. We spent a month trying to reach your campaign with no success. I know other black journalists, black-owned media, trying to do the exact same. And so part of this deal is also outreach. You got also a late start in South Carolina. And so I talked to people in South Carolina who said, hey, we don't know her. We haven't seen her. We haven't seen her campaign. So we can't consider somebody who we don't even have any relationship with.
Okay, let's start with the media. I'm on your show now, and I'll go on again and again. I just found out about the request 2 days ago, and I'm on the show. I have gone on other shows in local markets and the like, but I'm going to do even more of that. As for South Carolina, I think I've gone there 10 times now, and I did not have the resources of some of the other campaigns early on. For me, when we had that surprise showing in New Hampshire, that gave us the resources just because people gave online after that debate, because I had finally an opportunity to put an economic message out there. And that's given us the opportunity to invest not just in South Carolina, but where I am right now in North Carolina and where I'm going to be today in Tennessee. We are going to Alabama on Sunday, and hopefully I'll see you there. I've been in Selma several times before and have been part of Congressman Lewis's march. I'm going to continue on. I was in Greensboro just yesterday with that incredible visit to the Woolworth lunch counter, and this is going to be a big part of my campaign. And I just want you to understand why when you don't have the resources to invest in every state, like, say, a Michael Bloomberg, and you have to try your best. But I think I've been at every one of the major events in South Carolina, from Congressman Clyburn's fish fry to the NAACP event that we had, a Q&A for about a half an hour, and I continue doing my best, and I will continue to do that.
You talked about, well, also be honest, Mike Bloomberg has even appeared on the show as well, so we're trying to reach him too. You talked about an economic message. There are 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America. 2.5 million have one employee doing an average revenue of $54,000. What is your plan when it comes to driving capital to African-American businesses, but also helping them build capacity? Because it's one thing to say we need more black-owned businesses, but the reality, black-owned businesses need more capacity, and that is the ability to be able to compete for larger contracts, to be able to hire more people. What is your specific plan in this area?
Well, first of all, it's working with the Small Business Administration to make sure that more capital is getting to black-owned businesses. And there's some, the Trump administration actually got rid of the department that was working on some of these issues. I would reinstall that department in the agency. I also think that looking at government contracts and making sure that they are rewarded to the minority community is key. I think putting pressure on certain companies. I started the Diversified Tech Caucus in the U.S. Senate because I think that's a major problem at the upper ends with what's going on there. Entrepreneurship, promoting opportunities, science, technology, all of these things. And then, of course, on the other end of it, it's raising the minimum wage, something I think it is outrageous that we've had no increase to the minimum wage till when I first got in the Senate. It hurts people of color more than other groups in our country. Making sure that we've got a tax system that works for people, and I would take a bunch of that Trump tax money and put it into things like child care, retirement, and then finally, Congressman Clyburn has an excellent idea to invest, it's called 10-20-30, invest in historically impoverished areas. I think all of those things are going to make a big difference. And the one thing about me, I passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat, and I have kept my promises to people. And as I said, I think there's a lot of broken promises out there. And for me, this is a major priority.
One of the things that also, when you look at what African Americans want, they want someone who is really focused on criminal justice reform. There have been questions about your record as district attorney in terms of when it comes to not prosecuting police shootings, but also African American men who have been sent to prison. Some say they are innocent. When you look at that, the question is this here: how should African Americans trust that you are going to be an advocate when it comes to criminal justice reform, with the questions swirling around your tenure as district attorney?
Sure. I think the first thing that they've got to know is that I, of anyone up on that stage, knows what the problem is, and that there is institutional racism in our criminal justice system. And I saw it when I was there, and I see it a bit from afar in the U.S. Senate. And I have done a lot of things to try to fix it, but clearly not enough. As president, I could actually do big things to fix it. The first thing for me was the First Step Act. When I got to the Senate as a former DA, I got involved in those reform efforts, first the crack cocaine issue, and then, of course, the First Step Act. And I was a co-sponsor of that bill to reduce federal sentences for nonviolent offenders. Then I think as president, what we need is a Second Step Act, since 90% of people incarcerated are in state and local prisons and jails. And what we should be doing is putting out incentives to make that the law of the land by getting states to do the same thing. And there's all kinds of ways you could do that. The other piece of this is the criminal justice system itself. When I was there, I had a big focus on drug courts, a big focus on mental health, and other ways to try to get people out of the cycle and out of the system. I actually had a 12% reduction in African American incarceration rate during the 8 years I was there. That is not to say that there were not issues and there were not cases that could have been handled differently. It's just the raw facts, mostly because I focused a lot on white-collar crime as well as on drug courts. In terms of reforms, when I got there, they were using the old kind of eyewitness ID where they show all the pictures at once. I worked with the Innocence Project and got a bunch of our police departments, I had 45 police departments, to actually start showing one picture at a time. And that actually has been shown to reduce racial misidentifications, and also having an officer show the pictures who's not the officer who knows who the suspect is. Because there's all kinds of subtle ways that they tip off witnesses when that happens. I argued for having videotaped interrogations. They actually sent me out with the Innocence Project to debate the Queen's DA when I was a young county attorney, because I felt so strongly that that was a good thing, so that you make sure people are read their Miranda rights and you make sure that the right things are happening in those interrogations. And then I did a DNA review of all the cases that had DNA that were serious crimes, went back through all of our cases that were the most serious, and did that in conjunction with the Innocence Project. There weren't many. This was another, decades ago, so not everyone was doing this at that time. And I would carry through that kind of commitment to the presidency, which is the most important thing, setting up a clemency board outside of the justice system, so that I get advice on cases, not like this president has done, where he picks a bunch of white-collar offenders that he happens to know are famous in the news. But what I would do is routinely look at these cases and then review them to see which ones I think would deserve pardons, and have input from the community that is outside of the prosecutor's office. And I think so much of the time that's been missing in our system. That's why, for instance, everything has been messed up. The idea that felons can't vote, I think that's wrong. I've supported efforts to change that. The idea that we don't do enough on reentry. I visited an African-American woman that was incarcerated before I got my job as prosecutor. I visited a woman for over 10 years who'd been convicted of murdering her pimp, actually. And we grew to be friends, and she's now out, and I have some contact with her still. That's a personal commitment I made through a nonprofit to do that, but I hope it shows people where my heart is.
When we talk about, again, public policy, one of the things that also for African Americans, as they really begin to look at this public policy, housing is an issue. The fact of the matter is the black home ownership rate is at its lowest point since housing was frankly legal before the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. So what is your specific plan to address the issue of black home ownership?
This is, to me, when you look at all these public policy things everyone is talking about, I was so glad I asked this question at the debate. I know it wasn't an exciting time at the debate to get this question, but to me, if you can fix this, you are going to solve a lot of problems. If people can have a roof over their head and a stable place to live, whether it's an apartment or a house, and live for kids in the same district and be able to have the same friends and not have to move around because of economic issues, you're going to fix a lot of problems. And I saw that in my old job, and I see this in running for the presidency. So I actually have one of the most expansive plans out there. And that's because I worked with the mayor of St. Paul on it, who's a progressive African-American mayor. And so the first thing is there are over 4 million families right now on the waiting list for public housing or Section 8 housing vouchers. 4 million families. In many places, the wait time for a home is 2 to 3 years, and it can be even longer. And so I will completely eliminate that Section 8 backlog and make sure that people have temporary housing while they are awaiting a permanent place. And that's how you make sure that people are not left out on the streets, or that they're not going from place to place to place. And this really comes from my core. Growing up, I still remember my parents' house on this dirt road that they built with a GI loan. And I still remember the yellow oven that my mom had, that she had until she died, actually. She stayed in the same place. And that stability made a lot of difference in our life. The other thing about it is incentives for building more affordable housing to increase supply, and that means a major expansion of the low-income housing tax credit, and then connecting people to housing, banning landlords from discriminating against people based on the source of their income, including housing vouchers, supporting workers and reducing poverty, and we just talked about the minimum wage. All of this is going to make a difference. It's Barbara Jordan that once said that what America wants is simple. They want a country as good as its promise, and that's what this housing policy is about.
One of the issues also with housing also that really jumps out really deals on affordable housing. And what is happening is across this country, we're seeing cities provide massive tax breaks to various developers to build so-called affordable housing. And really what is happening is they are moving black folks out of low-income, moderate-income areas. Gentrification is a major issue. And so that also is something that has to change, because what you're seeing literally black folks being run out of Washington, D.C., run out of Chicago, run out of major cities where they've been living for generations because of this so-called push for upscale housing development complexes. And so how do we strike the balance between development in downtown corridors and other places, but where we're causing people who are largely black and brown to be forced out and moved away from these areas where they've lived for generations?
Exactly. And one of the most evocative things for me was walking around San Francisco, where they actually had painted murals of the people that used to live on the block, that because of course, all the high-end housing that had been put in and the increase in rents had been forced out. People painted their faces, and they're up on murals. And this is, of course, happening all over the country, as you point out. So to me, you've got to counteract that by having other ways to create incentives so people can stay in their homes. Minneapolis just did something new with multi-unit housing to allow it in areas that had been formerly been single homes, and it's actually being heralded as a really innovative way to try to get more multi-unit housing. It's worth looking at. It's been received very positively. It just happened with our city council, which is very progressive, and our mayor in the last year. The other thing about it is just to stop some of these incentives. I think the opportunity zones are a good idea in concept. We know that. But again, the way this administration has applied them and used them, it has rewarded money to people with a lot of money, and hasn't done and has allowed some of the money and incentives to go into places that aren't needed as much as other places. So for me, it's like, what are the results? Not what sounds good in a campaign brochure, but what are the results? And so the results should be that people have a decent place to live, they're not being shoved out of their homes, and that we have more equality when it comes to tax policy, when it comes to incentives for housing, as well as incentives for businesses.
The folks at The Root released their listing. It's called Every Democratic Candidate's Black Agenda Ranked. And at the top of the ranking with a score of 79 is Senator Elizabeth Warren. Yet at the bottom is Tulsi Gabbard with a 0, and then you at 22. And they looked at, so you're the next to the bottom. According to this breakdown of The Root, in looking at it, under economics, they say Klobuchar's economic plan for Black America is sparse. Criminal justice does not have a specific criminal justice reform plan, but also they list education score, politics score, feasibility, history, intentionality, impact. So there are a number there. And so really, I think, I mean, obviously there's a significant challenge there to reaching African Americans. And so the last question for you, your path forward. You're going to Super Tuesday, South Carolina, Super Tuesday states where you have significant black population. At the end of the day, if you're getting polling around 0.5 or 1% of African Americans, there's no way in the world you can effectively compete for president of the United States. And so what do you have to change to actually reach African Americans and get them to actually believe that you are the best choice to go against Donald Trump and represent Democrats?
Sure. So first of all, we have gone back to the root because we have an extensive plan for criminal justice reform that you can find on our website. For some reason, I think they didn't locate it. And it says we don't have a plan for K through 12 and the like when we have a very thorough plan similar to my friend Kamala Harris's plan that's been out there for quite a while. And I'm sure it's just some confusion, but we really do have all these plans up on the website. So we are working with them. This often happens with groups that sometimes there's just some miscommunication or the plan's not located, but it's right out there on the website, especially I know because the criminal justice plan I was extensively involved in, and it is quite long and quite thorough. So I'm looking at it right now. To use Elizabeth's words, it wouldn't fit on a Post-it note. So it's like 15 pages long. All right. So as far as your second question, which is outreach to the community and the future, I'm just going to keep earning their support and earning their respect. That is how I've gotten ahead in politics. Again, I don't have the biggest bank account, but I have a lot of really bold, good ideas. I have the fact that at home, I've had a lot of support in the community, a lot of support in the immigrant community because of the work I've done on immigration reform and helping immigrants, a lot of support from people of color. And I think everyone knows where I'm coming from when they remember that moment at the Kavanaugh hearing when he went after me, and I didn't just quiver. I stood my ground, and he came back and apologized. I am someone that stands up for people, and that includes our communities of color. That's what I'm going to do all over the country. I am going, as I said, in the next few days to Alabama, to North Carolina, to Tennessee, to Arkansas, and of course I was in South Carolina. I know I am not as well known as the vice president particularly, and I don't have the money of Michael Bloomberg. But what I have is the heart for what I've done and what I will do as president. And I'm just going to keep getting out there, and I guess I got to keep going on your show. That would be a good idea.
All right. Senator Amy Klobuchar, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Roland.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.